Will here from LOL Animation. I just want to run you through a quick summary of what this tool does so you can decide if this tool is for you. And then afterwards, I'll run through a comprehensive tutorial on how to use it. So 3D Flipbook Animator is basically like a 2D flipbook, but it's in 3D basically. So it creates these kind of flipbook animations that you can put anything per frame. But I created this whole tool set around this flipbook concept to make your life easier and to make it a little bit more advanced. So there's three main ways that you can use this tool. First of all, you can do frame by frame animation, but it's kind of hybrid frame by frame, because if the vert counts are the same, you can actually morph between frames. So it's kind of like hybrid frame by frame, depending on the workflow. Then you can also use it in conjunction with armature. So you can do like an armature animation, sculpt frame by frame. I call it the hybrid armature workflow. And you can go to like real extremes of characters. And then the third way is if you're doing kind of like fluid effects or some kind of effects or some kind of simulated sequence or just existing Alembic sequences, you can bring them in, you can edit them, you can optimize them, and you can get them ready for game engines, get the polygons down and do like overall edits to them. So it's useful for that as well. So yeah, let's run through this then. Cheers. Okay, so here's just a quick summary of the tools included in this 3D Flipbook Animator. Here we have a section to create flipbooks in different ways. You can have multiple flipbooks in a scene and you can merge them together if you want to. Once you created some flipbooks, you can define them and then you can edit those flipbooks. Here's some basic editing tools. You've got onion skinning, duplicate frame, delete frame, all the bread and butter kind of tools that you need to create a sequence. Then down here you have some more advanced tools. Some of these tools require the vert count to be the same over the range you want to apply it to. The vert count doesn't need to be the same over the entire flipbook, only the range within the flipbook you want to apply them to. With this, you can detect what those ranges are and where you can apply these more advanced tools. Here you have a very, very useful tool. I use this all the time, and it's Morph blend frames. So this is basically like having keyframes for stop motion animation. This also works on the hybrid armature workflow. So basically you can sculpt or edit specific keyframes in your animation, and then you can use this morph blend frames as long as the vert counts are the same in that section. And then you can create the in-betweens for that section that you define here. You also have interpolation settings, so you can do this with linear, ease in, out, ease in, or ease out. So I use this all the time, particularly in this sequence in different sections, and it saved me a ton of time. Here you have a range edit. So you can apply edits to entire range of frames in your flipbook, including creating kind of like ping pong animations where you take an entire range, you duplicate it, and then you reverse it so it will go back to the origin. So that's over there. Here you can copy the position of, or the world position of vertices, and then paste them to different frames. So you can select the verts in this foot, for example, and then paste that over a range so this foot will stay stuck to the ground. Then you have batch remove faces. So with this, you can select, say, this eye over here and delete that over entire range instead of having to do it frame by frame as you edit your flipbook. This is visibility and smoothing. So here you can set it up over entire range, or just a very quick way to set it up in your flipbook. Here is merge by distance, and you can apply that by frame or apply it to the entire flipbook. This over here is very powerful. So you can set up a modifier. So for example, say a decimate modifier on a single frame, set up all the settings, and then you can apply that to entire range of your flipbook. You can basically add any modifier that's available in Blender, and then this will copy that modifier to either a single frame or over a range of your flipbook. Here you can remove them again in a batch way. This is some advanced tools for the Hybrid Armature workflow. You don't need it as much, but sometimes you do need these kind of things. So I've included them here. And down here you have back to shape keys. So once you created the flipbook, you can either export it as Alembic or USD format, or you can actually push it back to shape keys. This is very flexible, so you can either do it every frame, you can do it every so many frames, or you can actually define specific frames as your key frames and just create those shape keys for those particular frames, and it will throw it back to an object with just shape keys. So this will optimize it for things like game engines and so on. And then lastly down here you have your export, prep and material settings. So once you created your flipbook and you're happy with it, you want to export the Alembic sequence. Toggling this on will make sure that it exports correctly and safely. Some of the tools in this flipbook could interfere with the export, so this is just an export mode for your flipbook once you've finished it. And then there's some other tools down here as well. For example, you can split your flipbook by material settings and things like that, and a few extra tools. So that's a quick summary of what's included in the tool. The next bit is going to be quite lengthy, but I really wanted to make a very comprehensive tutorial on this tool. So if you watch the entire video, you'll know exactly what you can do with this tool and how to use it to its maximum effect. Cool. So before I jump into the exciting bits of the tool, which is the editing tools that are built on top of this flipbook concept, I think we should just run through the basics. So by the end of this video, you know exactly how to use this tool. And you know the basic concepts underlying it, so you can use it to its maximum effect. The origins of this tool is trying to create something to make a better workflow for animating squishy gooey bits for a indie project we're working on. And it kind of evolved from there and become a full-fledged animation tool set for animating these kind of sequences. Okay, so what is a flipbook inside Blender? And I'll just quickly create one to show you how this works. So in this case, I just got a series of metaballs and they animate. I got my main metaball over here. They go dripping down. So if I want to make this into a flipbook, I go over here and I click on Create Flipbook and Create Flipbook. Now these metaballs, I can go and hide them. The metaballs are hidden. It's created this collection called Flipbook. That can be the same name that you've put here. And now it's got all the frames in this Flipbook in this collection. Your actual flipbook object is this one over here called Flipbook, or whatever name you put there. And now it will play one of these frames on every frame of your animation. In the background, it created this geometry node setup that just plays one of these meshes per frame. So it's fairly simple in that regard. So now if I'm on frame 12, this one would be playing over here. So it's just basically playing one mesh per frame as the frame moves forward. And this is your main object that controls everything. And here you can see your flipbook. To clarify this even more, I will create this flipbook from an existing collection. So in this collection, I've simply put 4 different shapes in a particular order in this collection. So another way to make a flipbook is to make it from an existing collection. So I'm just going to find that collection here, and then I'm going to create a flipbook from it. Now those objects have been converted and they've been snapshotted, and also their transforms have been applied. So now on every frame of my flipbook, one of these meshes will play. So from frame to frame, they can be completely different meshes, completely different textures. Each one of these are just a frame in this animation. So they can be completely different objects. So in summary, a flipbook is simply a bunch of objects in a collection, and you've got a controlling object that then plays whatever's in that collection sequentially as a flipbook sequence. So now that you know what a flipbook is, I'll quickly run you through this Create Flipbooks section, so you know exactly what you can turn into a flipbook and how to create flipbooks. So first of all, you can create 2 main types of flipbooks. The first is from selected objects over here, and this is this section over here. And the second way is from an existing collection. So you've just seen me doing this from an existing collection in the previous example. But to be honest, this is probably used a lot less than this section over here. First of all, let's just run through this Create Flipbook from selected. You can select any object or any number of objects, and you can create a flipbook from it. And basically what it does, it goes frame by frame. It takes a snapshot of the object on that frame and adds it as a flipbook mesh to your flipbook collection. So for example here, I can create a flipbook out of this one bouncy ball. And what I set here is the range in which the flipbook would be captured. So I want to capture the full range here, so I can set it to 1 to 24. Here you can give it any name, so I'm just going to call this bouncy ball 1, and then I'm going to create a flipbook from that. And this is bouncy ball 01. I can now go and hide this and this bouncy ball. So this was just normally animated. When it's being flipbooked, it will reset your pivot to the origin for all of these. So even though in the original ball, the pivot of the ball would have followed the ball, all the pivots have been reset. So everything syncs up in a visual way. You can also create a flipbook out of any number of objects. So for example, if I select both these bouncy balls and I create a flipbook out of them and I hide the original bouncy ball. So with creating a flipbook from selected objects, it doesn't destroy your original objects. It will just create a flipbook from them and snapshot them. So I'm just hiding the originals. So here I've got my flipbook, and my flipbook is actually both those bouncy balls together now. When it joins them together, it keeps the same vertex order, so it joins them in alphabetical way always consistently. And the operations that require the same vertex count, it will just ensure that consistency. And then also what materials are assigned. It will also keep the material. So you can see here both the materials are still present in this snapshot or in this flipbook. To be able to snapshot multiple objects into a single flipbook is especially handy when you're working with stuff like armatures with a character with multiple objects in it. So in this case, I have all these different objects in the character, and I want to create a flipbook from this. So with the armature character, you can either create a standard flipbook or you can create this hybrid armature flipbook. But later in the video, I'll explain the hybrid armature flipbook properly, because that's a whole section in itself. So in this case, I'm just create a regular flipbook out of this. And this is just an animated character. And it's just going to snapshot all those into a single flipbook for me. So if I create a flipbook, and then I hide all this original stuff, this is now a single flipbook with this entire animation in it. Okay, so let's quickly run through the UI. At the very top here, the start and end frame is the range that your flipbook can be captured. This you can put a custom name in, like you've seen me done before. Or you can direct it to an existing collection, but this is not used as much. Also, when you capture a flipbook and you want that capture to start in the playback at a different time. So say you captured 1 to 100 in this case, you capture that 1 to 100, but you set the start frame to 50, it will play those 100 frames, but starting the playback at 100 in Blender itself. So it does capture the whole thing, but here we can set a custom start frame for that 100 frames that it's captured. Here is creating a standard flipbook. Here is creating the hybrid armature flipbook, which I'll talk about later. This will only extract those snapshotted meshes to a collection, but without creating the flipbook object. This is if you have, say, an Alembic file that you brought in and you just want to capture some individual frames from that Alembic or any other animated object. You can just capture that range just as objects, but without creating the flipbook object. Now going to the flipbook from collection. So this is slightly different because you have an existing collection. So if I select that existing collection, make a flipbook out of it, it will ignore these ranges and just go by the amount of objects in this collection. So it will only have 4 frames in this case. Let's create that. You'll see here it also renames them. So it gives them the frame number, and it also reset the pivot of each of these so there's visual consistency, otherwise they'll jump around. So this one ignores all this at the top. It will capture the number of frames that's in that collection, the original collection. It will rename it, and it will reset the pivots and create your flipbook object. You can also give these a specific name. So basically, if you go here and you say own name, select that collection, and then create the flipbook, you'll see here it will rename it to the name you've put over there. Any of these, the frame rate is basically the frame rate that you set in Blender. So if you change your frame rate to 12, this will play back slower. So the frame rate of any of these flipbooks is basically your native frame rate that you've set in Blender. So you can also bring in existing Alembic files. So this is one I exported earlier. So if I import an Alembic file. So this is just a standard Alembic file. So this is my little demo scene here imported. So you can bring these in, and then you can create the flipbook out of them. So 80, create the flipbook. Now let's hide the original. And basically now you have whatever your Alembic cache was, you have a editable version of that. So I can go in and then edit this. So you see that frame has been edited. But I've got better ways to edit this. It's just to show you that you can bring in Alembic files. You can use the editing tool. So I can delete that frame again. So I can take frames out, I can delete frames, can add frames, I can duplicate frames, I can sculpt on existing frames. So in this way, you can use all the editing tools to edit Alembic sequences and then export it back out as an Alembic sequence. So what can we turn into one of these flipbooks? It's basically any object where the mesh can be snapshotted per frame. So it can be simulations, could be another Alembic sequence, it could be an object with modifiers on a animated object. Basically anything that a mesh can be snapshotted frame by frame can be turned into one of these flipbooks. So with creating a flipbook, you don't necessarily always need to capture a range. If you want to do true stop motion style animation, you can also just start with the single frame. So if I just make that 1:1, you can start with the single frame, create a flipbook out of that. And then via the editing tools, just hide the original. So via the editing tools, you can actually then go and sculpt or do whatever you want to do to that animation. And then through the editing tools, you can just go and add extra frames to your flipbook and keep working on it. Again, and a bit more, duplicate again. So you can start with a single frame as well, but that bridges us over into the editing tools themselves. And let me start on that. So now let's talk about the editing tools themselves. So when you first open the tool, you got these three main sections. So the first one was create the flipbooks like we just did. And the other section is merge two flipbooks together. So you can have any number of flipbooks in a scene. And with this, you can actually merge two flipbooks together into a single flipbook. And you just select them and you merge them. It will respect the timings in the scene and just merge them together. But the moment you go and you create a flipbook, so here I'm going to create my flipbook. The moment you create the flipbook, this edit flipbook section appears because it auto-fills the last flipbook that you created. If I remove this flipbook, that section disappears. But any flipbook you want to edit, you can go in here and you can go and pick that flipbook. So if you have more than one flipbook, they will all appear here, and you can just pick the one that you want to edit at that particular point. So the moment I select my flipbook, or when I create the flipbook and that gets auto-filled, this whole new section appears. And the main editing space with the basic tools are just over here. And then you have a whole bunch of other tools and expandable sections over here. There you go. But let's talk about this main editing section. So this is your basic editing tools, and you'll probably end up using this the most. So starting from the top, if you created a flipbook, it's called flipbook now. You can also rename it. So let's call it, rename it. There you go. It will change your collection name. It will change the names of the objects, and it will change the name of the flipbook object over here. So that's rename. Over here, you have markers. If you look over here, you can actually see when the flipbook starts and ends. So let me just hide the flipbook object, the original object. You can see here this is the range of the actual flipbook in your scene over here. And it's marked by these markers. You can put these markers on or off. So, but I find that it's very helpful to know exactly where your flipbook starts and ends visually over here. But you can turn it off if you want to. You'll notice if you go outside the range of your flipbook that the object will disappear. That's what this hold before and hold after buttons are for. So you can toggle these on. It will create a temporary holding object over here in the beginning and end. So now if you go beyond the range, it will still be there. So you can also then hold before and after without bulking out your actual flipbook itself. And if you turn these off, it will just disappear before and after. So this is hold before and hold after. The next button is onion skinning. And it's just what it says on the tin. I've got two separate kinds of onion skinning, wireframe or solid. So you can see it in a solid version or in a wired version. You can also adjust the amount of frames that it shows. And then you can also adjust the opacity of the onion skinning. So you can adjust how prominent it is. So this is just a toggle, and you can toggle this on and off. So if you're doing frame by frame kind of stuff, or you just want to see the flow of your motion, this is invaluable. So switch off onion skinning. Next are the two most important buttons probably in this add-on that you'll end up using the most, and that's why they're so big over here. So this is your edit mesh button. So this flipbook object is a collection of different objects. This edit mesh button will tell the main object that you want to go into edit mode of one of these objects over here. By default, they are hidden, so you only see them being called by this object. So if you want to edit them, you need an editing mechanism because your normal tab edit mode won't work. So you have to enter this special edit mode, see it as entering edit mode over here, but it is for a flipbook object instead. So this takes you into edit mode. If you click on edit mesh, this is basically your edit mode. It will take it to mesh editing. So here you go, you can change that. And now on that frame, that is changed. Or you can change this on the next frame, and you can see it changing over there. Undo that. So that's going to edit mode. What I have found a lot, especially if you're doing stop motion clay style animations, or just generally, I ended up using Sculpt much more than I used edit mode. So if it's something non-mechanical, organic, let's go out of this. If you put this, go to Sculpt by default, you then go into edit mesh, it will go into Sculpt mode instead. So now you're sculpting each time you're going to edit or mesh edit. And if you turn that toggle off, you'll go into edit mode instead. I ended up switching to Sculpt mode all the time, so it was better just to build this into the add-on. So if you're using Sculpt more, switch that on, and then if you go into there, it will go directly into Sculpt mode. If you go through your frames while in edit mode, it will switch here which one you're editing as well. So you can go through your frames and edit them. So as you step through your frames, while in edit mode, you will still be in edit mode on the next frame. Just undo that. So that is the basic edit mode. The other thing you can do is edit your entire sequence at once. So I'm not going to go to sculpt mode in this case. I'm going to go to edit entire flipbook. So if I click on this, it will bring up all my frames and it will put it into edit mode. So now if I go to select all, and I want to move the entire thing up and make the entire thing taller. If I then stop editing, you'll see the entire thing is lifted and the entire thing is taller. So that is edit entire flipbook. Below edit mesh and edit entire flipbook, you have delete frame and duplicate frame. And that's pretty self-explanatory. So if I want to delete frame 8, I can just go to that frame and I can delete that frame. You'll notice here that my timeline gets shorter. Now my flipbook is just 8 frames long. You can delete, you'll see that bit of a jump there because that frame has been deleted. You can also duplicate frames. So here in the middle, if I press duplicate, 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 you'll see here that now the frame has been duplicated. So it will take your current frame and duplicate it. There we go, duplicated frames, and then it runs through. You can also copy a frame. So if I copy this frame, I go to the end and then I can paste that frame. So at the end, that first frame has been copied in, or I can go and paste it, say, over here. So now that first frame has been pasted there and then pasted at the end. That brings us to add selected as next frame. So I've got the little Suzanne over here. So I'm going to go through and just before it hits there, I'm going to add Suzanne as the next frame. So I'm going to select Suzanne. I'm going to add that as the next frame. And now you'll see, let me just hide her again. And now you'll see she appears as the next frame. So any selected object you can add as your next frame. It will completely replace the next frame with that selected object. So that's one way of doing it. Then there's join selected frame to the Flipbook mesh. So here I have a little torus. So on that frame, I want to make this part of the sequence. So if I select that, I join it as part of the Flipbook mesh. So I'm going to join it over there, hide it. And now you'll see that is part of the next frame. So if I duplicate it a few times, you can see there that has become part of the mesh. So this is kind of like a join in extra objects to your sequence itself or to your flipbook. You can also change the start time of your flipbook. So at the moment it starts at frame 1. If I update this to start at frame 10 instead, and I update it, you'll see here that your range has shifted. So it will start on frame 10 instead. So any of your flipbooks, you can change the start frame of them. You'll see here as well, it updated your start frame on these. So these will always, the name of these objects will always be in sync with the actual timeline starts. So this section was your run-of-the-mill bread and butter editing tools over here. And now we get into the bit more exciting and bit more advanced editing tools. And some of these do rely on the vertex count being consistent over the range you want to apply it to. It doesn't need to be consistent across the entire flipbook, only the section you want to apply these more advanced editing tools to. So for the ones that need a consistent vert count over the range you want to apply it to, I built this little tool called Detect Same Vertex Count Ranges. So if you go into that, you can see here that you can analyze your flipbook and then see the points in the flipbook where the vert counts are the same. So if I analyze this, because I'm back to the original one, it will just tell me from 1 to 10, I'm fine. If I have a more complex flipbook, where sometimes you have similar vert counts, other times you don't, in this Analyze Flipbook, it will tell you what is happening across your flipbook. For example, if I analyze this flipbook, so I go to Detect Ranges and I analyze this flipbook, you'll see here that frame 1 to 60, so it's up to there. I actually have the same frame count, and then from 61 to 68 I have the same frame count. Then I have one frame here, it's at a different count, and then from frame 70 onwards I have the same vert count again. So this one was actually split up in different sections as he changes shape, and I changed objects to make the sculpting better. So this will tell you where you can use some of these more advanced tools. One of the tools that I use the most, and that's the one we move on to next, is this Morph Blend Frames. So this is a bit like using shape keys. So a lot of the same rules apply, and the range you want to apply these to needs to have the same number of vertices. So just like in shape keys, it needs that consistent number of verts. In Morph Blend Frames, you need the same. So let me expand this over here. So we already know that 70 to 32 we find. So I'll quickly do a Morph Blend here. Just going to switch this off. Actually, keep that on. So let's go to Morph Blend Frames. I'm going to make some copies of this frame, so let's go and duplicate that frame, say for 10 frames, so up to frame 20. So now it holds that from frame 110 to 120. That shape is the same. Duplicated frames. Now if I want to create a morph, first of all I'll go to frame 120, and this will be almost like a keyframe. So during those frames I want him to stretch even more. If I now go into Edit Mesh, and yeah, let's do sculpting in this case. So let's select this, let's drag him up here, let's really drag him even taller, so he kind of like drags up here. There we go. If I exit then edit mode, I'm going to have this jump over here. So and go to frame 110, and then I'm going to have that jump. But I want to do this over 10 frames instead. So I'm going to create a morph blend. So I just input my frames. So here I want to do it from 110 to 120. I add that as a range. Once I added this as a range, You can choose to do it with ease in, ease out, with linear, or just ease in or just ease out. So I'll do it with ease in and out. And then the second step is you have to select the verts that will be influenced by this. So you can pinpoint just particular parts of your mesh, or you can do the entire mesh. So I'm just going to select my verts, select them. I'm just going to put my overlays on. I'm just going to select everything. And then you can go and you can morph that range. So I'm going to morph it. It'll just take a second. It's quite high poly count. So now if I go from frame 110, I step through my frames, it interpolated that section for me. So I didn't have to go and paint these frame by frame. I can do it as keyframes and then just blend between these different ranges with this morph blend frames. Now I'll move on to just a much simpler example so you can see exactly how it works. We return back to this simple cube. So I just wanted to show you this other example so you can see exactly what's going on. So in this case, I want to make this cube taller on frame 6. So I can now go into edit mode and I'm going to just select these, and on frame 6, I'm going to make it taller and stop my edit. So if I now go through here, you'll see that it's taller on that frame, but I want to interpolate this. So let's create the morphs for this. So from frame 1 to 6, I'm going to put a range in, and then I can do the verts. In this case, I'm just going to do it on those selected verts, and then morph ranges. So it's basically a 3-step process. You set your ranges, you select your verts. If you want to do the whole object, select all your verts, and then do your ranges. So this is now created all the in-betweens for me. But I have a problem. At frame 7, it's going to jump back down. So ideally, I want to create a second range. So let's create it from frame 6 to frame 10. Add that to my ranges. And that is why you can define multiple ranges in this morph blend field. So now if I do this again, select my verts, I'm just going to do it on those ones. And then I'm going to morph my ranges. Now it's going to go from 1 to 6 and morph between them. And then it's going to go from 6 to 10. So create my morph. So now you can see it goes up and then it goes down. So it created these in between frames for me on the selected verts. So it's a 3-step process. Define your ranges, select the verts you want to do it to, and then morph your ranges. You can delete these one by one, or you can just delete them all if you want to set some new ranges. So let's do another example to illustrate the interpolation with these. So in this case, I'm just going to start with a single frame. So 1 to 1, create the flipbook out of that. And then I'm going to duplicate that frame 10 times. So from 1 to, oh, let's make 12. So I have a flipbook. Let's just hide the original object. So I have a flipbook and it has a static frame here in the beginning, and that has just been duplicated over this range. Okay, so now let's go to Morph Blend. So let's just move this all the way over there. So put it in edit mode. And it went to sculpting. So I just switch mode to edit mode. Select all those. And I'm just going to move that all the way over here. So now my flipbook, the very last frame, is over there. And I'm just going to put on alt before and after. So for all these frames, it's static, and I just moved that last keyframe. So now let's go somewhere in the middle, maybe frame 7. I am in edit mode again. I'm going to go put it here somewhere in the middle, and I'm going to make it taller as well. So now in this sequence, I have my start frame, I have my middle frame, 7, which is going to be in the middle, and then 12, which is going to be at the end. So I can stop editing. Now go over here, and I'm going to set my ranges. So it's from 1 to 7. Add that range. And then from 7 to 12 is my next range. Select my verts, select all of them, and I am going to do a linear interpolation or linear morph for the in-betweens. And now you can see that goes up and it goes down. It created all the in-between frames for me. If I edit the entire mesh, you can see here they perfectly evenly spaced, go in a linear fashion up and down. Stop my edit. Now let's do a ease in and ease out. Select my verts, all of them, and then I'm gonna morph my ranges. If I look at it now, I edit the entire range. You can see here the spacing has changed because it's easing into that and easing out. So you have a bit more of a curve going on over here. Now I can do something like select my verts, select only the bottom ones, make those linear, morph my ranges, and now the bottom is interpolating linearly, and my top was interpolated as ease in and out. So this is how you can separate different parts of the mesh, interpolating at different speeds if you wanted to. And then you can set any number of in-betweens and any number of ranges here and use these as your kind of keyframes and just simply morph between them to create your in-betweens. The morph blend frames are also a very important part of the Hybrid Armature workflow. So I think this is a good point to bring in that workflow and show you exactly how that works. So here is a raw version of the demo scene that you've seen earlier, where he kind of blows up. I removed all the Flipbook elements and only kept the armature animation on this. So this is a normal armature animation. If I go into pose mode, this is a normal armature and normal skinned objects. So if I go back into this, so when you create flipbooks, you can create a normal flipbook or you can create this hybrid armature flipbook. So the difference is that creating a normal flipbook flattens all your modifiers, it gets rid of everything else, it simply takes a snapshot of your mesh on that frame. Hybrid armature flipbook doesn't do that. If you have an armature and you want to do both the sculpting and still being able to animate your armature non-destructively, you can create this hybrid armature flipbook instead. So for that, I'm just going to select all the objects skinned to my armature. I'm going to set the range and I'm going to create a hybrid armature flipbook. There we have it. Now these objects over here, the originals, it doesn't delete them. I can just go and hide them. With those hidden, if you go down here, you'll see it's created this new flipbook. These frames, instead of being a straight snapshot, it is just a copy of your skinned objects joined in their rest position. So if you look at any of these, you go into modifiers, go into object mode, go into modifiers, you'll see here it has the armature modifier and it is still skinned to the armature. The original skinning has been hidden, so what you see here is the actual flipbook and everything is combined into one mesh and one flipbook. That means that if I go into pose mode, on frame 28, where I am now, that flipbook object is still being controlled by my armature. That means that I can, so you see the flipbook actually disappears there. This means I can use all my flipbook tools like sculpting keyframes for morph blending or any of the other tools that we have, flipbook tools that we have, frame by frame or morph blend frames. You can use that on this flipbook at the same time being able to animate it with your armature. So let's do like a quick little setup here. So say in frame 7, I want to see the hand bone scales up there, but I want to really sculpt that inflate. So if I go into edit mode and I make this smaller, see, I can really start like inflating this more. And then let's do this. Increase the size, so let that hand really swell up. In real production, you'll be a bit more careful than this, but let's really make that hand swell up over there on frame 7. If I step through my frames, it jumps to that sculpt. So this is just a very rough sculpt. Let's go through, and there the head bone scales, so in frame 24. But let's really kind of blow it up. So let's use this, and on this frame I'm going to sculpt this to really blow up here, so that so the head's really gonna blow up. There we go. You blow up the ears as well, so let's select this like can inflate those. Yeah, so you can sculpt the animation on this frame however you want this to look. But of course now we're going to have that jump. This is where the morph blend frames then come in. So let's quickly set up a morph blend. So I've just got some keyframes sculpted. So frame 7 and frame 24. Okay, let's have a look. So I'm just going to set up some ranges. So let's set up a range from 1 to 7. So that's this bit where the hand blows up. So create the in-betweens for us, add that range, then say from 7 to 13. 7 to 13. That there's my next range, so it's going to go to the extreme and it's going to go basically back to the original frame here on frame 13. And then when will we start blowing up the head? So really want to start blowing up the head maybe here at 18. So from say 18 to 24. I'm going to add that, and then we don't want that jump back, so we want to blend from 24 to maybe 30. Okay, so we got all our ranges set up now. Select all verts. I'm just going to select the whole thing. And I'm going to do the morph blend between those ranges. Give it a second. Okay, done. So now it's created all those in-betweens for us. So the hand gradually swells up over the 7 frames and then come back down to frame 13 to the normal frame. And then here at frame 18, the head will go all the way up and then blend all the way down. So very quickly, we can sculpt these individual frames or keyframes and then blend between them with a bit of forethought and stuff. So, and the nice thing about this is in between, you can go back and you can still go and adjust your original animation. So say when the head blows up there, I can have the head go even higher with the actual bone animation. We delete that keyframe. You can really go nuts. So using a combination between sculpting and armature animation, you have the best of both worlds. So that's the basic hybrid armature workflow. You create a hybrid armature flipbook, and then you can sculpt individual frames, use them as keyframes, and use morph blends to blend between those frames. And then later on, I'll show you how you can output that back to Alembic or shape keys as well. There's a few things that you should understand about the hybrid armature workflow in ways that it's different from a standard flipbook. Is the fact that your armature is kind of the main controller of this. So if I go to one of my extremes, so say where the hand is really swollen up, so this is frame 7. If I select frame 7 here, I switch off the armature modifier, you'll see here that you actually just sculpted your mesh in position where the armature is, but in your rest pose, without the armature deformations, this is what it actually looks like. This means then that if I put it back on, that if I delete a whole bunch of frames here, so I'm just going to delete a whole bunch of frames. You'll see here the head is starting to swell up sooner now, because that frame where the head has been sculpted has moved up. So if I delete some more, where even the head those deformations or those sculpted frames that I did are just gone. And now the flipbook just ends. Yeah, so there it switches off, so it was holding that. So you'll see here that the flipbook ends earlier now as well. Now, if I duplicate the last frame through the length of the armature animation, it will just fill it in. So your armature deform is kind of the main deform of this. So to illustrate, so you handle this a little bit differently, just thinking what your armature actually does. So if I introduce like an error over here, so let's go into edit mesh, and I'm just going to grab the ears here and make them really long. You see it's just on that frame, but if I now duplicate this frame, throughout the animation, it's going to keep that deform, because say on frame 60, if I look at frame 60 here, I disable my armature deform, you'll see this deform has been copied to these frames. From that frame onwards, that is the frame that is then propagated. So that sculpt you did is then the frame that gets propagated in your flipbook. If I want a clean frame again, so say I can just copy any of these frames where I haven't done any sculpting. If I paste it anywhere here, you'll have a frame again without that deform. See there where I pasted it? The deform is not there anymore. This is kind of an important concept to understand about using the hybrid armature workflow. One thing that is kind of a happy accident is if you create your hold frame. So at the moment I haven't got any hold before or after frame, so I just got it to this length. So if I create a hold after frame, if your hold after frame ever looks different from your last frame, just switch this on and off again. You'll see here it gets recreated. Sometimes it can get a little bit out of sync. So you can have a hold before as well. But if you look at these, so now that one is visible. So when I switch to this, this actually also has the armature modifier. So if I go into pose mode, it's actually FK. So if I go into pose mode, my hold frames, before and after frames, that's not part of your flipbook. They also have the armature modifier still applied. So in theory, if you're not exporting, you can have a bit of a section where you use this in Blender natively, and then just have a hold before or after frame, and then you can just continue animating your object. If you want to export it, it's better that the whole thing is contained within the flipbook itself for the export. Okay. One of the downsides with using the Hybrid Armature workflow, and something you just need to be aware of, is, say, for example, here, if I go into edit mode, and I pull this too far away from the joints. If I now want to animate these, you'll see here you start to get some really weird results on your armature itself. So trying to, because the shape has moved so far away from the bones that if you go back to your armature animations, things can look a little bit weird. So this frame 15. See, the actual sculpt is then something like this. So if you go too far away from your bone origins, then sometimes things can get a little bit weird. So the same goes for edit mode. If you enter edit mode, I find sculpting is a bit better, but say if you want to go there, you go, I don't default to sculpt, I go into edit mode. When I select Verts to move, you'll see the verts are actually in their original position. Your pivot is actually where your hand was. So that's why you do get these kind of weird pivots if you're using edit mode. So if you want to use edit mode, you can come and select that frame here and then switch off your armature deform to have a better representation of what you're actually changing. But to be honest, you don't actually use this workflow much because it's more about sculpting particular frames. So that nicely ties us back into how you can use this extra little section we have here and extra tools here called Armature Modifier Vertex Groups. In here are some extra tools that you can use to basically almost go between having a hybrid armature flipbook and a normal flipbook. So one way you can use this, so say this on frame 7, I want this just on this frame to be a normal flipbook again. So if you look at frame 7 here, it has the armature modifier, it has the vertex group, and it has everything that a hybrid armature flipbook has. So I can actually go and apply the armature deform on this frame. And if you look at what's happening there, you'll see here it turned it into a normal flipbook now. And you can even go and you can delete the vertex groups on that frame as well. You can do this on all the frames or on this range that you define here for all these tools over here. So now that it's just a normal flipbook, and you see it goes, the one before, if I go over here, the one before is still a hybrid armature flipbook. If I go here, you'll see it's not controlled by the armature anymore. And because it's not controlled by the armature anymore, if I now go on this frame and I go to edit mesh and I switch to edit mode, you'll see here I can go and make an adjustment. So it's not connected. So I'll just pull, I'm just going to pull this like this. Okay, just to illustrate. Okay, now I can stop my edit. This is not part of a hybrid armature workflow anymore, but if I want to, I can actually bring it back. So in this section over here, I can go to my original object. So I'm just going to unhide my source that's still skinned to the armature. I can select all these. And now I can get that data again. So I can come here and I can copy this data. So it gets all the armature data, the vertex groups, the weights of my selected objects. It temporarily combines them into a single mesh as well. So the vertex order remains the same. So I can just go here and copy it again. And now on frame 7, if I look over here, see it's a normal armature. It's a normal flipbook at the moment. If I go and paste that back to the frame, you'll see now, if I hide these again, my originals, if I go into this frame and see it's controlled by the armature again. So with this section over here, you can basically have a little bit of back and forth if you want to, or you can make this entire sequence now. So if I just go here, this entire sequence, I can actually go and make the entire thing a normal flipbook without the armature modifier, because this will apply the armature modifier with these offsets and just turn it into like a normal flipbook without an armature on it. So if I do this now, just keep an eye on this. It will basically turn this into a normal flipbook, and if you want, you can clean it up, and you can also go and delete all the vertex groups if you want. So now this is not controlled by the armature anymore. You'll see here it's just a normal flipbook. And if I go into edit mode, you'll see here this is just normal flipbook, and you can edit it like normal frames, but it hasn't got the hybrid armature flipbook anymore. So while we're here, let me just summarize. So this section over here, you can get armature data and skinning from your original objects that you created the flipbook from. As long as it's still fairly similar and the bones are still fairly well lined up, then you can actually take that and then put it back onto your flipbook. And you can also, now this has been turned into a normal flipbook, I can also then go and I can unhide these again, make sure that I'm not in pose mode. I can copy this data again. And now I can also bring it back for the entire sequence. So if I then paste it for all, it'll just take a second. There we go. Okay, so now it is a, let me just go out of edit mode. And now it is an all flow good then, but it also remembered the changes that you made. So if I go over here, and then these jumps you can fix in the normal way with the morph blends, but you can actually bring it back even after you've done the edits. So this is a pretty extreme edit, and it still brought it back skinned relatively in those positions. So it is possible to bring these back. It's probably not the greatest way to work, but there is a little bit of flexibility here if you want to do it this way. So this section is a little bit experimental, especially these tools, the copy and paste it back onto the thing. It seems to work. It probably needs a bit more testing. And you guys can let me know if you find any problems with it. This is fairly stable. So if you want to make a hybrid armature flipbook into a normal flipbook, this will apply all your deformations and all your skinning and snapshot it and just make it into a normal flipbook. So this would be the main way to do that. It doesn't work that well if you do it with this copy paste modifier and apply all modifiers here. It won't apply your deforms as well as it does in this section over here. So this is the special apply armature modifier, while you still get your deforms and what you visually saw before. By default, also you see this one, it excludes the armature modifier over here. So that's this section over here. So with the hybrid armature workflow, it doesn't necessarily need to be across your entire flipbook either. So you can do stuff like this. Here I have my original animation, and it is not a hybrid armature workflow at the moment at all. The hybrid armature workflow is just basically a armature modifier with the vertex group then applied to a specific frame of my flipbook. So to show you how this could work, here I have my original slimy animation. I just created this very rough armature because for a few frames now, I want to control it with the armature instead of sculpting this. First of all, I need to be able to select my object, one of these objects, but they are hidden, to be able to apply automatic skinning to that object. So I'm on frame 110, so I go in here and under visibility and smoothing, just make that frame visible. So I'm going to make that frame visible. And now you can see here it is actually visible. So I can select this frame. Then I can select my armature. Then I can go into parent it with automatic skin weights. Now, if I select, I can now reset my visibility. And now I can go into pose mode. And that frame is now controlled by this armature over here. Let's just see how the automatic skinning turned out. So I have these just automatically skinned. I'm not going to spend much time on doing good skinning for this, but you can see you have some extra bone controls now on this particular frame, on frame 110. However, if I move to frame 111, it doesn't control this anymore, because only my frame 110 is currently being controlled by this. To have more frames controlled by this, I can now go and just duplicate my frames. So I'm going to duplicate it, say just 10 times. So now I have 10 frames that is being controlled by the armature. So here in the middle, they're still being controlled. So I know now from frame 110, I'm just going to select all, set a keyframe. And 120, set a keyframe, the entire armature, and then here in the middle, I am just going to let it go like this. So it goes like this. So in the middle of my flipbook, I can have my object being controlled by an armature. So in this way, you can use the armature modifier. So any modifiers that you apply to a frame on a flipbook, when you duplicate that frame or you copy and paste that frame, it brings with it all the modifiers that the original frame had that you copied. Cool. So that kind of concludes my section on the Hybrid Armature workflow. As you can see, it's very flexible and you can combine these things in many different ways. And I'm sure you're going to find new ways to use this tool as well. Now we move on to the next section. So let's go through the range edit tools over here. As an example here, I just have my little cube as a flipbook moving along here. Over here, you set the range of your flipbook you want to edit. So if I go and delete from 6 to 10, and I delete that range, you'll see here my flipbook has become shorter and the end has been chopped off. However, if I delete 1, 2, 5, so all the first frames in the flipbook, you've set your start frame of your flipbook over here. So if you remove the first part of it, your flipbook is still going to try to start on frame 1. So if I delete the first 5 frames, so delete that range, my entire flipbook would move up, so the flipbook can start on that frame. So it respects your start frame if you delete the start of your flipbook. Next, let's duplicate some ranges. So here I set 1 to 5, and I just want to duplicate 1 to 5. If I press duplicate, it is going to repeat that range. So here it's first 5 frames, then it duplicated it, start at the beginning again, and it goes through the rest. It will put this duplicated range just after the frame that you duplicate there. If you want to change this behavior, you have this target frame over here. Just undo that. Okay, so I have my normal range again now. So I want to do 1 to 5, but I want the target frame that it duplicates that to be, say, at frame 8. So we set that as frame 8. You can set that to any frame, obviously. And if I duplicate that range now, you'll see here that it plays normally until frame 8, returns to the beginning. It's been inserted at frame 8, and then it jumps kind of to the end there because it's being inserted at frame 8. You can insert this at the end. If you insert this at a frame that you haven't got a flipbook, if you say set this to frame 20, that's outside the range, you just need to be aware of this. If I now duplicate 1 to 5 and try to do it at frame 20, it will simply add it at the end of my sequence, since you can't have those frames in between. If you really wanted this frame to hold until frame 20 and then inserted that range, you would have been better off just duplicating that frame till frame 20, so the target frame has a starting point that's within the range of your flipbook. So if I duplicate 1 to 5 here, now you'll see it's going to hold that and then it's going to paste that. So this target frame needs to kind of be within the range of your flipbook. Otherwise, it will just put it at the end of your flipbook if it's outside of the range. This target frame applies to both your duplicate and duplicate and reverse ranges. Okay, so let's get to reverse range. So here I can, let's do the whole sequence, but you can do just a section as well. Let's go to 10. If I reverse 1 to 10, the moment it's starting there, if I reverse that, it's going to start over there, because it's simply reversed the order of those frames. If I undo that, if I reverse 1 to 5, this doesn't apply for reverse. So if I reverse 1 to 5, it will just reverse that range. So anywhere in your sequence, you can reverse range over here. Then the other one is duplicate and reverse. So if I set this for the whole range, this can be a section or the whole range, and target frame works here as well. So if I duplicate and reverse this sequence, it will go there and then it will come back. So it's kind of like a ping pong effect. So if you want to reverse animation or duplicate it and reverse it at the same time, this is this duplicate and reverse range. The last thing in this range edit section is this join selected to Flipbook over range. So you can set a particular range that you want to join extra selected objects to your Flipbook. So in this case, I'm just going to join this sphere to my Flipbook over the entire range, but this could be any range. So I'm going to join it over here. I'm going to hide this, and now you'll see this is part of my Flipbook now. So this is how I can bring extra objects over entire range into your Flipbook. So the next section here is Vertex copy paste. So for this, you can use it in a very simple way, or you can use it in a slightly more advanced way. So it's still just the same animation. For this to activate, I actually need to be in edit mode. So I can either go here and switch to edit mode, and I also have to be in this edit mesh mode over here, but I've got default sculpt on. So I'm just going to switch that off, and I'm just going to switch it on and off, and then I can select some vertices. So the reason you need to be in edit mesh is because you need to be able to select verts. So over here, I'm just going to select these verts over here. So I'll first show you the simple way. Just going to select those verts over there. I'm going to copy their position and then go later on in the animation, and I am going to paste that back. So that and frame 6, you see it stays in the same position. You can paste it locally, so that's local to the root of your Flipbook object itself. If your Flipbook object is animated, you can still paste it local, but it will be in a different position in world space, or you can paste it in world space. But assuming the root of your Flipbook object is not animated, it doesn't really matter if you paste it in local space or world space. Anyway, so that's the simple way to do it. So for example, here I can go to every frame and I can paste that position. So you can see now this will stay in the same position throughout the frames that I pasted that position. So that is the simple way to do it. You can also reverse your last paste. And that will reverse the last paste on that frame. Okay, so now for the bit more advanced way to use this copy and paste verts. So first, you can store where your current object is on that frame. So for those verts, I'm going to store their position. Now that it's stored, I can do my edit. So in this case, I'm just going to move it up like this. Then I'm going to copy the selected vert position. So copy that. So first I store my original position, then I copy the new position. And now you'll see I've got some extra options over here. So I can paste the relative location. So now if I go to my next frame and I paste the relative position, it's just going to move it up. So it's just going to paste the difference of the translation between the stored position and whatever the position was when I copied the vert position. So if I go through this now, it's simply going to move it up by that amount. If I paste relative, if I paste relative, if I paste relative, and if I paste relative. So you see now you have that up and down motion of the original animation, but it offset everything relative to what that stored position was. So that's the slightly more advanced way to use this copy paste verts. Another thing you can do as well is if I copy this position like I have, and then let's go to the next frame. So for this, instead of pasting the local position, I'm gonna paste blend. So if I want to paste a halfway position between the copied vertex positions and this vertex position on the current frame, I can, for example, set this to 0.5. And then if I now paste local, it's going to paste a position halfway between the original position and what the stored position was. And that also works for the paste relative. So instead of it moving all the way up, it moved about half of the way up on the relative paste. So I hope that makes sense. Once you get your head around it, you can actually use this in many ways. Cool. That brings us to batch remove faces over here. So let's just collapse that. So batch remove faces. So this is very simple. This, however, requires the vert count to be the same over the range that you want to delete those faces or batch remove those faces. It's just so Blender can know from the vertex order which ones you're removing per frame. So as long as your vert count's the same for that range you want to remove things, then this should work. So for example here, I'm going to remove from 1 to 20. And then if you click here on select faces, I'm just going to make sure those are selected. And over that range, it should delete all those faces from those frames. So delete faces range. There we go. And those faces has been removed from my flipbook. The next section is pretty straightforward. It is visibility and smoothing. So for your flipbooks, your main object is calling all these different frames, but these frames are actually hidden. Sometimes some of the operations in Blender requires the object that you, for example, want to parent to be visible at the time that you do it. So you need kind of an override to make these objects visible because they basically hidden by the add-on. So if you want to see a particular frame, you simply go to that frame. And so we're on frame 10 over here, and you see at the moment it's hidden. If I make this frame visible, it overrides the add-on until you move the frame again. So this just makes it temporarily visible so that you can do any operations where you need this to be visible. For example, now if I hide my Flipbook, you can still see it, but you only see that particular frame. To reset the visibility to what the add-on does, you basically just go and reset it over here. So if you watch this, it will reset it. This is also a way that you can just see your entire sequence. So if you want to make your entire sequence visible, you can also do it over here. So here you can see your entire sequence visibly. And then you can just reset your visibility when you're coming back to working with your Flipbook. Then here's just some quick settings so that you can set objects to be smooth shaded in a batch way. So you can either do it per frame, so I can make frame 1 be smooth shaded and then the rest won't be, or I can smooth shade all, and this will just run through my entire sequence and smooth shade it. I can also smooth by angle, so you can do it on the frame or you can do it on the entire sequence. And then if you don't like the angle, you can set a new angle here and then you can update that for the sequence as well. Here you can flip your normals. Sometimes an object could have flip normals, so you can flip your normals on a frame and you can flip them back, or you can flip your normals over the entire length of your flipbook. The next section, merge by distance, is particularly helpful when working with text, but generally it could be quite helpful if you want to batch merge by distance across your sequence. So you can either do it on the frame or you can do it for your entire flipbook. So here I just have some standard text and I just animated the extrude, so it's just like a little text thingy here. I'll make this into a flipbook. So frame 1 to 20, create a flipbook out of this text. I'm gonna hide my text. Now if I go into edit mode, you'll see here text has these separated words. So you need to perform a merge by distance. And you could do that frame by frame and go through, but it will take a lot of time. So with this, you can just do it for the entire sequence. So now these are not separated faces anymore. That means you can use your smooth by angle, for example. Let's make that 30, do it for the entire sequence. So you can use these kind of modifiers and smooth by angle better if you have your merged verts. So next we get to a very powerful tool in here, and this is this modifier copy paste. So if you want to say optimize this scene, the poly count here is pretty high. You can add a decimate modifier to this object. However, you might also want to be able to do this frame by frame. And also you might want to apply any modifier that's available in Blender. So with this tool, you can just set up your modifier in one frame, and then you can copy that and paste it to a range, to a single frame, or to the entire sequence. So let's do this optimization with decimate here. I'm just going to go. So first of all, if you want to apply a modifier, the object has to be visible. So I'm just going to select this frame 1. I'm going to apply a modifier to that. If I want to add a modifier, you'll see these are grayed out because these need to be visible. So I just need to override my visibility again. So I go here to visibility and smoothing, make that frame visible. So you see now that frame is visible. That means I can go and I can apply my modifier. So I'm just going to apply the decimate. I'm going to make this 0.2. And now that frame is decimated. Now you can go and copy, and it will copy this modifier stack. You can copy this. Then I can go to frame 2 and I can paste it on that frame as well. So now my first 2 frames are decimated. But I can do it to the range as well, from frame 1 to 10. But because this one already had a decimate modifier on, it's doubled that one up. So just be careful with that. But the original one that you copied the modifiers from, that won't have a double pasting. It ignores the one that you copied from. It's just if you've done other things already to it and then you paste range, then this is what happens. You can also remove all these pasted modifiers. See, they have a name here called PST. That means pasted modifiers. And from the entire sequence, you can just quickly remove them all. So you can clean up your sequence so they don't have those pasted modifiers. This one is the one I applied manually here on frame 1, and that's why that's not deleted, because that's the one you created it on. Okay, so I can copy this again. I have a clean start now, and I can go and paste modifier to all. And now my entire sequence has that decimate modifier on it. But what makes this quite powerful, because you can do specific ranges or afterwards, I know here this is frame 4. If this doesn't quite work here on frame 4, I can go and I can change my settings until I get my detail back, and I can do that per frame. So you really have that per frame control over your sequence. So here I can make percentage more. It's actually on 25. Sorry, you have to first just select your frame, and then you can go and adjust it frame by frame. So here you just have to go and select the frame you want to work on, and then you can go and adjust the modifier. You can also, if you're in edit mode, it will automatically switch to the next frame. So here you don't have to go and select them manually. You'll see here it changes your selection, and you can then go and tweak them one by one when edit mode is on. So maybe that is a little bit easier. Then if you're happy with your settings, So I can go here, tweak each one so it's just right, especially if your shape is changing a lot. And you can do this with any of the modifiers. I'm just going to stop editing. And if you don't want the modifiers anymore, you can apply all your modifiers over here with apply all modifiers. Now, if you go through the sequence, just this back on. If you go through your sequence, you see none of these have their modifier still applied because it basically just applied them and flattened your stack. So you can do that once you've finished with your work if you want to, and if it's slowing down your machine. Obviously you can go frame by frame and you can manually apply them as well, but this will do the whole sequence for you. If you're working with a hybrid armature workflow, or you don't want your armature modifier to be flattened, this will exclude it by default. If you put this off, if you copy the modifier and it has a armature modifier on it, it will also copy that modifier, or if you flatten it or apply copy paste it, it will do your armature modifier as well. Especially with the hybrid armature workflow, you want to exclude the armature modifier in these operations. So that's the little tick box for that. Okay, so that concludes this modifier copy paste. We've already dealt with this armature modifier and vertex group tab over here earlier, so I'm not going to run through that again. Next here is back to shape keys. So if you want to turn this from a flipbook into a shape key sequence, or make it into shape keys on a hybrid armature mesh to export this to a game engine like Unreal Engine, for example, this is where you can set this up. So this is fairly comprehensive, so I'll run through all the different options here and what you can do. So first of all, just like any other shape key, you do need the range or the sequence that you're going to do. It does need the same amount of verts in the same vertex order. So it's the same rules as any other shape key. So if your sequence doesn't have this, you're better off going with something Alembic or USD file. But this could be a lot cheaper if you can throw these two specific shape keys and export them that way. Okay, so I'll quickly run you through a summary of what these different buttons do, and then I'm going to give you some examples of different exports so you can see exactly how to use them. So first of all, you can export to a new object, or you can export to an existing object, but I'll show you later how that works. You can set the range you want to export as well. You can do every frame, a shape key on every frame, on every so many frames, or you can define your own keyframes as your shape keys to morph to. Then you can set here toggle to animate those shape keys or not. Normally you would keep that on. And also if you do a range, you can actually blend it in and out over so many frames over there. Then you have the actual execute here for extracting the shape keys. Here you can delete all the shape keys created by this add-on for this defined flipbook. So if you created a bunch of shape keys, you don't have to go manually delete them. You can actually just press this and it will delete all the shape keys that this has created. You can imagine if you created one per frame, there will be many of them. So that's a quick there. And then a lot of this relies on the same vertex order and the objects having the same amount of verts. But if you've got a flipbook like this that originally was made up of loads of different separate objects, and you want to push that to a single object as your target for your shape keys or your base shape, you need a way to join these meshes in exactly the way in the vertex order that the rest of this add-on does. And this is where you go and join selected meshes with the add-on method. So if you are going to join something to push it back, if your flipbook was made up of a whole bunch of objects that you then combined into a single object for your flipbook when you created it, this will join it up in exactly the same way. So you can push shape keys to it and it will have the same vertex order and so on. So that's this whole little interface here, but I'll show you now examples on how to use this in practice. Okay, so first of all, I'll just run you through the simplest way of using this. And this works whether it's a hybrid armature flipbook or just a normal flipbook with just shapes and things in. As long as it's got the same amount of verts, you can do this. So the simplest way is just allow it to make a new snapshot. I'm just going to do every frame, so I'm going to get exact representation of what's happening in this because every frame will be a shape key. And I just simply go and set the range, set that to new snapshot mesh, put it to every frame. I've got my animate on, and I'm just going to extract those shape keys. So there we go. It's going to run through, it's finished. Now you'll see here this new group here called, or new collection here called shape keys, and this shape key will live in there. So I'm just going to hide. Let's hide the armature. Let's hide my original flipbook. So it doesn't destroy your original book. It just basically creates a new object, which is this one. So it's going to call it that, the name of your flipbook, and then shape key snapshot. And if you go and look at this over here, you'll just see it's a normal object. Let's see, it's a normal object. It's just a single object, and it simply has a bunch of shape keys that just animates. So you can see them animate and switching on and blending between them as you run through the sequence. So this is just basically an object with a shape key for every one of the frames. So this is the one and the simplest way to use this. But you can use it in a much more advanced way as well. So if you're working in games and you want to push this as shape keys to a game engine, so you have a skinned mesh and then you push these sculpts you've made as shape keys to the skinned mesh, this is the way that you would do this. So for that, I'm basically just going to go over here and I'm going to unhide my original. Let's just unhide these and over there. So I'm going to unhide my original skinned object that I use for my hybrid armature workflow or the source of it. So this is my original skinned mesh. However, I have a problem. The flipbook is basically a unified mesh where this is lots of separate little meshes. So I can't really push it at the moment as a single skinned mesh. So what I'm going to do is make sure I'm not in pose mode. I'm going to select all these. Now it's very important to join these in the same order, with the same vertex order that the rest of the flipbook's been made in. And like I said before, this is the button to do that. So in this case, I'm just going to select this group over here because it's going to parent it to the armature. And now if I join these, it will join them together. If they were skinned to an armature, it's going to keep the armature modifier and the vertex groups and assign them in the same way that it was assigned to the hybrid armature workflow. So I'm just going to do that. You see, and it added this add-on joint mesh master. So this is basically the same as these. So if I hide these, you'll see this one is basically skinned, but it's a single mesh. So it's just been combined in the same vertex order and the same join order as the rest of my flipbook. So if you join anything together in this flipbook, it's better to use the methods in this add-on because no matter what order I selected these in, it will join it in the same alphabetical way. Okay, so now I have a target mesh, target skinned mesh that's also skinned to my armature. So it's basically the same animation, but it's obviously not my flipbook. My flipbook has got all the extra deforms and things on them. So for now, yeah, I'm just going to keep that live. So in this case, instead of creating a new snapshot mesh that will collapse everything, now I'm going to do it to existing source mesh. So this can work if it's skinned or not, but this is the method that you have to use if you want to push morph targets from a hybrid armature workflow to a single skin object. So here, existing source mesh, I'm going to select then that object. I'm going to set my range. And here, if I want exactly the same animation, I can set it to every frame. If I want fewer frames, I can set it to whatever intervals I want here. So say 5 frames by default, but this can be any number. So this will give you then a key every 5 frames or shape key every 5 frames. But in this case, I actually want to do it a little bit differently. So if I go to define keyframes, here I can actually set the frame. So I'm already got a base mesh with a base shape. So here I can go and I can set where my shape keys will be, my defined shape keys that I want to carry through. So if you want to reduce set to push it to a game engine, this will be much lighter. So first of all, I'm just going to go here and I'm going to set a 0 influence. So this is basically the same as my base shape. So I'm going to add a key there. Then I want a shape key. Where does it swell up the most? Over there, maybe frame 7. I'm going to have an active frame. And then it blends back down. So here I'm going to have a 0 frame again. So basically it's just going to go back to the base shape. And then the head starts swelling up there. I'm just going to go and just hide this for a second. Okay. So on 18, I'm going to have a 0 influence 1 again. So it's basically just going back to the base. And then the head starts swelling up to 24. So I'm going to add an active frame there. And then it comes back down. And I'm going to do a 0 influence frame. So there we go. And then it basically goes to that shape over there. So that starts from 31 to this to 36. Okay, so I'm just going to have these. I'm going to have this animated. I'm not going to have a blend in and out. And now I'm just going to extract this then to this. Because I set this as my target, so it's going to existing mesh. That is my target. It will have the same vertex order, the same vertex count. And then I extract my keyframes. Okay, now if I hide my flipbook and I select this, just go here and select this, you'll see here the mesh has all those shape keys. And if I go to here, you'll see here it only recorded my active shape keys. So basically I just have 3 shape keys that then does most of this animation. So you can start with the flipbook and you can push these back and sculpt the way you want, get your shapes that you want, and then you can push it back to a very cheap form of shape keys over here. So you can define exactly where you want these. And this actually looks pretty similar to that test animation. And it's all back to shape keys now. And this is still skinned to the armature. So this object, you can then export this animation to a game engine with the shape keys. It will be nicely reduced to only a few shape keys, and it will be cheaper than an Alembic file, and you can push this to normal gameplay animations then as well. So this is if you use an existing mesh to push it to. You can also push it to existing mesh. If it's not a skinned mesh, it can just be like a normal combined mesh, or just a normal if you have a single object. As long as that range of your flipbook has the same vertex order and same vert counts, you can push to these shape keys in this way. Cool. And then one last thing is this blend in and out. So I just wanted to show you how that works. So that works better if you're actually going to an existing mesh. Otherwise, if you do to a new snapshot mesh, it will just do it from the beginning of the range. So here I've got my target then. So let's just go and delete the add-on shape keys. There we go. And now this is being white clean, so it hasn't got those shape keys anymore. Say I just wanted to do a section of this very accurately. So in this case, I just wanted to capture, let's just see here, my original flipbook, just unhide that. So I wanted to just capture that head blowing up very accurately to shape keys. So in this case, I am going to just do I'm going to do it on every keyframe. I'm going to do it from 20 to say 30. But I want a bit of a blend in for that as well. So I'm going to set maybe a 10 frame blend in and a 10 frame blend out. And it's going to push it to that existing mesh on every frame. And let's extract them. Okay, so I'm going to hide my flipbook. Go over there. This is still visible. So let's see here and what has happened. Just select this mesh. You'll see here, if you look at these, it basically kept my shape and gradually would have blended in that first frame. And then I have that happening and it goes back to the normal shape. So this just gives you, if you're going from extremes and you're doing, for example, this every frame, you can do like a bit of a blend in and blend out there. So yes, you can do this in a number of ways. It doesn't need to be hybrid skin mesh. It can just be a cube that's got deforms, and as long as the vert counts are the same, you can use these same methods to push it to shape keys. And I think that's about it for the shape keys for now. And now we get to the last section over here. Export prep materials and delete. So in this last section, we have some of your getting things ready, exporting, or deleting your entire flipbook. So with this flipbook animator and the way it works, if you try to export this as an Alembic sequence, so if I go File, Export, I've got my object selected, export Alembic, and I'm just going to do, so demo +1, and then I'm going to go select it only, the start and the end frame, and I want to export this as a Alembic file. You'll see here that you get an error. Because the add-on uses a special algorithm to manage the visibility of these objects as you work through them and as they place them back. This can get in the way of the Alembic exports and the visibility doesn't sync up. I try to make this automatic, so for when you export it just works, but it was very unreliable in certain circumstances. So I decided to make this safe bake option over here, and this puts the add-on in a mode that it doesn't get in the way of your exports like Alembic exports. So now if I put this in export safe bake mode, and then I go and file export Alembic, and I'm just gonna do it as that again, select it, and then I'm gonna override. And is there anything else I want to keep? Maybe face sets as well, yeah. Okay, and I'm just going to overwrite it. See, now it exports without any problems. So if you want to export these as Alembic sequences or USD exports, put it in this export mode so it safely bakes them out to Alembic sequences. So now if I go and import Alembic, it is over there, imported. Flipbook 01, I think this is the Alembic sequence that I just imported. I'm just gonna hide this one, and you see here it brought in an Alembic sequence. So you obviously just have to go through and then look at these textures, because Alembics bring the textures in a slightly different way. So yes, to export, use this export mode. So while I have the Alembic sequence in here, I can actually show you. So I'm just going to put that off. I can actually turn this Alembic sequence into a new flipbook. So I'm just going to call this flipbook and I'm going to create a new flipbook from this. Now I can hide this Alembic sequence. And you'll see now this is now a flipbook. I'm just going to do this. So here's my Alembic flipbook, and there's my Alembic flipbook object there, and it's a perfect representation of the Alembic. So now that this is a flipbook again, I can have a look at the materials. So say I can pick a material here, the skin material, and then I'm going to apply it on all frames to that slot. Let's try slot 4. There we go. So it was actually in slot 4, and I just replaced that material there, and it's going to do it to the corresponding spot on this. So you can go here and can replace materials over your entire flipbook by this apply material to all frames. If you have an inconsistent flipbook, so in the beginning there's maybe only a couple of objects, and then there's more objects later in the flipbook that has more materials on them or different materials. If you export an Alembic file, it won't always know that there's going to be new materials later on. It just looks at the first frame, see what materials are there, and then just assign those materials. So you end up with just 2 slots. If you sync materials to Flipbook, it will look at all the materials across your entire Flipbook and assign a slot to it, and the same slot across your entire Flipbook. Even the frames where that material is not present, it will reserve a slot for it. So this is the sync materials to Flipbook. And if you go through there, it will just basically make sure that every frame of your Flipbook has the same materials then synced up to it. But you can also split up your Flipbook according to materials. So I can take this flipbook. So I'm editing this flipbook Alembic at the moment. That's the active one. I can now go and I can split this up. So if I split this up by material, it will run through and it split it up into 7 flipbooks because I got 7 material slots. This is a little bit messy because it came in as Alembic. But here you see for every material now I have a separate flipbook. So for example, if I hide the other ones, you can see then there's the original Alembic flipbook. So that one, you can see there, that is the one for skin. So that is its own flipbook now with its own collection, and each one of these is then a separate flipbook. So you can actually split up these flipbooks by material if you want to treat them separately, export them separately, and things like that. So that's just another little addition to this. And then finally, I can actually delete an entire flipbook. So here, if I'm actually editing this one at the moment, and I'm just going to hide the others. And with the one being defined that's being edited, it obviously has this object, it has start end frames maybe, it has all these collections and groups associated to it. But if you want to delete an entire flipbook, and you can just go and delete it over here. So here it will just go through. It will ask you to confirm that you want to delete this flipbook, and then you can delete this flipbook and it will be gone. And the collections associated with it will be gone as well. So that's a way to delete it. I did not make it part of the normal edit workflow over there, just in case somebody accidentally clicks on it. So it's a little bit hidden away down here, just so you don't accidentally click on it, but you can go and clean up your scene and delete the flipbook, the entire flipbook out of your scene right down here. So now I've run through all the tools and all the different sections. I know it was quite long-winded, but I really wanted to give you a very comprehensive overview and examples of how to use this tool. And the last bit now, I'm just going to run through some speed runs of these example scenes that I created, and I'm just going to comment over them. And you're welcome to watch that as well if you want to get a better idea of how I use this tool. Just keep in mind that actually while I was creating the scenes, the UI looked a bit different because I was developing the tool and refining it as I was doing these scenes to find a better workflow for these. So the UI might look a little bit differently, but it's just a speed run through to give you an idea of how I worked with this tool in a practical project. Cool. Cheers. Okay, so here we have that slimy monster thing I did. So I just started with one shape, used a lot of the onion skinning to get the shapes in there. So lots of onion skinning there. So I pushed that shape as far as I could until the shape became a bit difficult to use. So I kind of remeshed it. And then from that point in the animation, I started using a new mesh. And once you got that shape, and here I changed mesh again for the second section. And from here, it stayed fairly consistent. So here I could use a lot of the morphing. So I did use a lot of the morphing here. I added some shapes into it by joining them. You know, use my onion skinning a lot, and then started working on animation. I did a lot of morph blends for this, setting the pivot to where I want the pivot to be, and then use that to kind of like shape these. still a lot of kind of like keyframes. So you would do like the keyframe, you create a morph blend between those, and lots of cleaning up with sculpting. And you can see here, I'm getting my different shapes. Here the camera starts coming in, so I'm playing towards the camera a lot. So you'll see here I'm testing within the camera frame a lot here to play it to the camera. Yeah, and that was it basically. But here's this little guy. I had a lot of fun with this. So I was obviously going between sculpting certain frames, doing the morph blends. There we go. So this was fairly early on. So you can see here I'm constantly going between the animating with the armature, adjusting poses, and then sculpting, and going back and forth between the two. If I need to go and adjust poses, I went in. So it's kind of like you can go back and forth and use both at the same time as I was going through here. Playing to the camera more, kind of like sculpt those blown up frames. Here going in. So you can obviously do this a lot more refined. I just needed to get a test out to make sure everything works with this. So yeah, that was running through this. It was kind of a happy accident to discover this workflow, but it is actually a very nice workflow to work with. And you can push it to some real extremes. And the nicest thing about this is the fact that you can actually use your armature and the sculpting at the same time and just seamlessly go in between the two. And then you've got the extra bonus that this I can actually throw back to a game engine, extract those blend shapes or shape keys or morph keys, whatever the program is, that you can extract, export it to, say, Unreal Engine. So this could actually be, these shapes in position could actually be part of a faster gameplay animation, just with a bit of care and stuff and a bit of planning. But yeah, it can end up being quite light. It can end up going to a wide variety of different places. And yeah, it's just kind of super fun to work with. So yeah, cool. Cool, so that's it for this whole tutorial. Check out my other tools if you like this. You can buy this from Superhive, from anim.works probably as well, and from Gumroad. And I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys create with this. If you do create something with it, send it to me. I would love to see. And yeah, I've put a lot of time and effort into this add-on. I'm going to use it a lot myself in our project, but still, yeah, I would really appreciate your support, and I hope you make some really cool stuff with it. Cool. Cheers.